Hello and welcome to the Reds Report. Well, it's another season nearly done. Season 10 about to be completed, and to have a bit of a season finale. It's the two men you probably want to hear from most. First of all, he says 4-4-2 with Cotter on the wing. It's our very own Steve Andrews. Steve, you all right?
Good evening.
And also with us, one of the voices of South Yorkshire sport, South Yorkshire football, is of course BBC's Adam Oxley. Good evening, Adam. How are you?
Good evening. Very good, thank you.
Right, boys. We might as well get straight into it. And bear with me if this works or not, because the retained list has come out this evening about an hour ago. So let's have a look at it. I don't know if this will work. Look at this. If you're watching on YouTube,
I tell you what, modern technology.
It took me 5 hours.
Fantastic.
Oh. The retained list. So Barnsley FC can announce their retained list, and it's as follows. Retained players: Jonathan Bland, Luke O'Connell, Barry Cotter, Andrew Dallas, Mal de Chevigny, Josh Earl, Neil Ferrugia, Leo Farrell, Georgie Gent, Davis Keeler-Dunn, Kyron Lofthouse, Casper Lepata,
Beautiful,
Kalachi Takali, Corey O'Keefe, Adam Phillips, Rogan Ravenhill, Mark Roberts, Jonathan Russell, Jack Shepherd, Jackson Smith, Fabio Jallo, Max Watters, and Vimal Yoganathan. So, let's look at that one first. Steve, might as well start with you. We'll talk about the Reading and everything. This list. Are there any surprises there for you?
Maybe Max Watters is a bit of a surprise, I would have thought. Adam Phillips obviously can't get moving once, so he's going to have to stop a little bit longer. But no, I don't think so. I think there's a few there. I didn't know whether Lepata would get back in, but obviously we Connor, maybe he wants to have a look at him, even though he's been out on loan, which is good. Jack Shepherd, fantastic, had a really cracking season. So it'd be nice for him to get back in. That's not bad, that is it? I don't think.
I suppose what we as fans do, and Adam, I suppose it's different for you, isn't it? Because when you are commentating, I know you're a football fan and you want our local teams to do well, but you are sort of like or you have to be like the neutral one. But like I said, when we talk about certain players, if you look at John Russell. And people, he might have his critics, but he gets goals, don't he? From his position, especially, he's been getting the goals. Adam Phillips, which I'm sure the name will be mentioned further on, and we know. But I think against Reading, we saw that with the right motivation of the sideline, those players were almost upgraded to version 3.3, 3.4 from version 1 that we've seen for this season. So it's quite good, isn't it? Because if loads would have been released, it would have been a huge rebuild job for Conor Horahan as well, wouldn't it?
Yeah, look, these are all the players that are still under contract with the club. So whether they have interest, whether they move on, we'll see in the summer. But if anybody wants to take these players, then they'll have to pay some money for them. Clearly, there are some good names still on that list that you would want to see there. The fact that Davis Keeler-Dunn is under contract is great, but will he still be a Barnsley player next season? You could list quite a few from that perspective. And then there's others like Steve's mentioned, like Watters and others that might not necessarily have done as well as people had hoped, that if they got interest, they may well go. I think there's a couple in there that are really interesting. Shepherd being one, having the brilliant season that he's had at Bradford. They've loved him at Bradford City, and we can maybe criticise the club for a variety of things, but if he comes back and he's a better player from having a year at League Two and getting a promotion under his belt, yes, he might have got minutes this year for Barnsley, but equally, is he going to be a better player for that experience? Could be. So, look, I think there's a group of players there, and I do think even though Connor's had a couple of months at the end of the season, this summer will essentially be a little like a clean slate for But for those players, for everyone else, look, he wants to play a certain different way. There's some players that are going out that we'll mention shortly. There's others that will be coming in, and the team may well look very different. And players that haven't necessarily done well this year may look a bit different. Who went into this year thinking John Russell was going to have a pretty decent season, score some goals, play in a more attacking role, and surprise us all a little bit? So you never quite know who are going to be the players, but essentially, I think there's a base there of retained players that are under contract that you'd hope the majority of which are still going to be there next season. Maybe a couple leave for fees to help reinvest. Who knows?
Yeah. So the rest of the trade list. So contract option activated is Conor Barrett.
Good.
Player of a new contract. Now, interesting names here. Luke Olker, Aaron Atkinson. Kieran Flavel has been offered a new contract. Stephen Humphreys has been offered a new contract. Kieran Graham and Ziggy Kozluk. Of course, Rob Kozluk's son. Bailey McCann, which is Grant McCann's son. And Tom Senior. Returning to the Premier Club following a loan spell, Joe Gauci, Dexter Lambikisa and Clement Rodriguez. Departing players, Josh Benson, Theo Chapman, which I think will surprise.
That is a surprise, that one, I must admit. It surprises me.
Sam Cosgrove, maybe not so much a surprise. Josiah Dia, I think that's come as a surprise.
Yeah.
Adam Hayton, who's one of the academy goalkeepers. Charlie Higginbottom, Nathan James, Jonathan Lewis.
Yeah, that surprised me.
Yeah, Jean-Claude Makisi, Aidan Marsh. Now, I've seen on social media lots of people saying, Aidan Marsh, young talent. I think he's done pretty well in Scotland and he's well liked. So it could well be that he is being released and therefore,
to go up there.
Conor McCarthy is leaving as well, as is Amiza Nyonzo, Donovan Pines, Hayden Pickard, Callum West, and then there is some other academy players that will move on as well. Now, in that list, and we've talked about him sort of quite a bit. Previously, Stephen Humphreys. We said a couple of weeks ago, Adam Oxley, that he felt like the striker we wanted in January. Obviously, he was always been here, but under Horahan, a bit of a, renewed energy. Can you say he seemed to be working harder? He got some goals. And as a neutral, I know the record of Conor since he took over, it's not been great, but you've got to say, there's been goals, hasn't there? We've got 7 goals in 2 matches. Then we finish off the finale with a good win away at Reading. So in that respect, it seems like he's gotten his idea over and he's let the players know what he expects of them.
Yeah, and that was always going to be the case. It'd have been lovely if Conor had come in and Barnsley had have won every game and maybe made a late dart to the playoffs. But with how the rest of the season would have gone, that would have shocked everyone, really. He's tried a few things. He's obviously transitioned towards a new formation and a new style of playing. And Stephen Humphreys, I've got to admit, is somebody that has impressed me all season. I like interviewing him. Football needs more characters like Stephen Humphreys. They're interesting people to talk about. And we are collectively, as local media, trying to confirm the situation with him because it does say that he's been offered a new contract. Well, our understanding was that he'd signed originally with a year plus a year's option. So if he's going to be offered a new contract, well, surely isn't that just triggering the option in his contract? Yeah. So we'll see how that goes out. But whether he has already got a year that's going to be triggered or whether he's been offered something, it'd be great if he did stay. I think he's linked up well with Keeler Dunn. I think both he and Keeler Dunn have had to play forward roles when they're not naturally forwards, which is something that we've talked about a lot all year. And they both have individually talked about in interviews with them that that is a role that they've both had to adapt to. And maybe next year, if there's maybe 3 across the front or however it looks with some more wide players, then if a central striker can be brought in, and let's be honest, let's hope there's more than one, then they could operate really well around them. So yeah, I very much hope that Stephen Humphreys is still at Barnsley next season because I like him as a bloke. And I think he's had a decent season all considered.
Yeah, definitely. And I know, Steve, you were flying back from your little break in the Greek islands, and the Reading match. Now, some people saying, end of season, but Reading at the start, at the 3 o'clock kickoff, we're trying to get that final playoff position as Leyton Orient were playing up at Huddersfield. So, Reading, with all their turmoil off the pitch, that morning woke up to the news that the takeover looks like it's been ratified and that's happening. So, they had, they'll fed us up. They were up for it. They wanted to entertain the fans. It feels very much like a new chapter in the book of Reading. And Barnsley looked, to me, I enjoyed watching it. It looked a different side. I don't know if you've seen any of the highlights, Steve. But...
Yeah, I caught highlights. I actually caught last 20 minutes of it when we got home. And from what I saw, even in that last 20 minutes, I know Reading managed to score, but it did look like a more cohesive team. They played better together. It's not really ideal last match of the season to say, well, they had a bit of a spring in the step, but they did. And maybe that's from where they kick on into next season, finishing off with a result like that. And the enigma that is John Russell, who it's like Marmite, you either love him or hate him. And, I've slagged him off uphill and down Dale for the beginning of the season when he was shocking. And he was shocking, let's be fair. But this last few games, a few games over Christmas, this last few games, he's played in a more attacking role and he's got forward more. And for a big lumbering lad, he can't half finish. And he does strike however ungainly he looks or strangely how he runs and what have you. You can't fault the fact that he gets in that position. And I think the good thing about it is he's not scared to have a go. That we play too much tippy-tappy football and piss about with it at back. But at least when he gets opportunity to unload, he goes for it. And he's scored some cracking goals.
Yeah. Obviously, we had the interview with Gunnar Horan a couple of weeks ago. And it's refreshing, isn't it? And I don't know if that's because, he used to play here before. He's been successful, obviously, as a player and wanted to make his mark. But there was nothing that was ambiguous about him, Adam. What he said, we asked him, one of the questions was, how would you describe a team that's managed by Gunnar Horan? And he was very clear about wanting to play with Ford at the back, wanting wingers to bob up and down that exciting football, which I suppose he was part of during that season when we went to Wembley twice. So is it fair to say that it worked then? He could probably make it work again with the right players, of course.
Yeah, and that's one of the key things. I thought Connor's interview with yourselves was great. I thought it was as much of a two-way chat as anything else. The fact that Connor seems really keen to get different views in. By all accounts, he's very much a disciplinarian and he's looking to set standards. And clearly the way he's looking to play does on paper sound great, and the theory is always wonderful, isn't it? This is kind of where the reality check bites on all of that. It'll come down to how he can shape the squad over the summer with the budget that he's got, what key players we've just been talking about managed to be retained around that, whether with what has been said by Mladen and by Mirav over recent months, I suspect if they got a decent bid in this summer for one of the players, they'd have to take it to reinvest in the squad, and that's naturally the way the squad is going to go. But there is something to get behind, and in this part of the world, we've had this conversation at Radio Sheffield, that whether it's this part of the world, whether it's others, whether we're looking through a South Yorkshire, North Derbyshire prism at this, but you look at all the clubs. Paul Cook's back at Chesterfield in his second spell. Grant McCann's back at Doncaster Rovers in his second spell. Chris Wilder's back at Sheffield United in his second spell. Matt Hamshaw is back at Rotherham United. Big part of Paul Warren's coaching team. Conor Howrahan, playing legend, returned last year. And then a lot of these other guys that I've just mentioned are doing well. Very rarely, in a lot of ways, you go back for that difficult second album, whatever they call it, and it wouldn't necessarily work out. So with Danny Wilson at Barnsley a few years ago, second spell just didn't work. Sometimes it doesn't. But equally, there is something to be said probably locally about the supporters knowing somebody, and when they feel like they know somebody and they've seen them operate before, they can get behind them and give them a bit more time. And Connor will get the benefit of the doubt more than Darryl Clark did, more than Neil Collins did, more than other people have done because of what he did. But also don't let that disguise the fact that if things are not going well in September, October, November, then that goodwill will only extend so far. And this podcast will be talking about it. Our phone-ins will be talking about it. And Connor isn't just going to get a free pass because he was a really good player a decade ago with Barnsley Football Club. I like the way he's talking. I like the vision. Some pieces are there, but he needs the right recruitment behind him this summer, and he may well need time. And at the minute, as a football club, Barnsley Football Club has not shown that it is willing to give people time.
No. And Steve, I suppose, you know, they talk about wanting to get out of division and everything else, but I think I've sort of resigned myself to the fact that I just feel next season needs to almost be, it's like building a new brand of football, how we can identify. So if we finish mid-table next season, but we've got a good group of players that, you know, understand each other, that are doing well, listen, I'd love them to get involved in the playoffs, don't get me wrong. But I don't think that should be the aim. I think the aim should be to create a brand type DNA of football that Barnsley fans can, I suppose, reconcile with, identify with, and therefore he can close that gap that is there between the club and the fans. And whilst he might not get us out of the division at the first time of asking, he can unite the fan base again and everybody get behind. And that's just as important, really, isn't it, Steve?
I think it's really important now. And I think Connor's touched on that he wants to try and bring the fans and the club back to where it should be. No, next season you'd like to think that they are going to bring some players in. Hopefully some players are quality. You know for a fact they're going to bring some more possible players we don't know, or young players in, because that's just the way we work. But you also like to think that they will give him this time because of who he is as well. And if he can pull the team closer to the fans and play attractive football, because let's face it, after the last 2 seasons, he's got a pretty low level to start with, so he's not got far to go to pick it up a bit. So that's a good thing for him. But we just need to, I think he realises from being at Oakwell what Barnsley fans actually want. I know we talk about, you know, sweat on shirt and all this rubbish, but it's true. We like to see some endeavour. We like to see a good meaty tackle, but we like to watch good football. But we like to be able to say to other clubs in country, yeah, this is our style. We have an identity. And we've not been able to say that for a couple of seasons now. And I think if he can bring that back, that'll go a long way next season for no matter where we finish, whether it's mid-table, skirt with playoffs or whatever. I think that will create a good base then going into following season. And I think that's what we should be looking at. We shouldn't be looking at, oh, Connor's in charge, spend £10 million and let's aim for top spot. Because let's face it, it ain't going to happen. And you look at teams that's come down and other teams that's going to be in league, it's going to be another tough league next season.
Yeah. It's going to be an interesting league for you, Adam, because whilst as before we could have said, well, there's not many derby matches, but I tell you what, let's get this right, with Bradford, with Rotherham, with Doncaster, potentially Chesterfield, it's going to be decent, isn't it?
Fantastic. Absolutely fantastic. I was at Doncaster at Notts County last weekend when they won the title. I saw them promoting against Bradford, was at the celebration event. Grant McCann, like I said, former Barnsley player, of course. I'm sure there'll be a few Barnsley supporters that won't mind seeing Grant in charge at some point in the future with what he's managed to do at Hull and Doncaster and Peterborough and everything else. But that's for another time. I'm not going to get him leaving Doncaster at the minute because he's doing a brilliant job there. But he's got that club back moving in the right direction. They've just had Richard Woods announce his retirement tonight. What a fabulous career he's had. But they're moving in the right direction. I wouldn't put it past Chesterfield to go up. They are the team that has sneaked in 7th on the last day. And we've heard stories in the past how that can work, particularly when in League One and League Two, not as much in the Championship, but they can come up. Bradford, you've seen the scenes at Bradford over the last couple of days. It's like they won the Champions League, not just squeaked into 3rd place in League Two, but they're a big club, former Premier League club. So you had them in with Huddersfield, you had them in with Barnsley, with Rotherham. There are some great local matches in League One next season. And the counterbalance to that is Plymouth and Exeter.
Yeah.
Yay.
On a Tuesday night.
On a Tuesday night in November.
You've seen the list. One of the names that we mentioned who was being released, just sort of quickly, is Josiah Dia. Now, he was on the fringe a little bit, probably called upon when, injuries and cards and everything else. That's the other harsh side of football, because we talk about legends and we talk about Horahan, making a name at Barnsley. Plymouth captain when he came in, nobody really knew him, did really well, led us to victory twice, went on to have, a good career when he went to obviously to Villa. He played for Derby. Did he play for Sheffield United?
Yeah, played for Sheffield United for a spell, yeah.
Yeah. So, Bruce Dyer, all-time Barnsley goal scorer, record goal scorer, came from, down south. First £1 million black football player, all the promise. Came to Barnsley, had his demons, but he's made Barnsley his home, hasn't he? And he does incredible work in the community. Obviously, he's got his church side, but he's got his football academy. And for a lad like that to get, not to be a contract extended or a contract offered, that can be the making or breaking of players, can't it? And I suppose on a day like this, when you're looking at Humphre's being offered and DKD staying and all this, there are also players now at home thinking, "Oh my God, what's going to happen now?" Because he's been at that club since God, what a lad! But he's been there like forever, and that's difficult as well, isn't it? You know what I mean? Steve, we've seen him play a few times. You hope, don't you, that somewhere somebody's willing to take a punt at him in whatever division to give him regular football, because he just feels that that's what he needs, and that's what's been lacking, that bridge between under 23s and man's football. And sometimes,
let's face it, he's not really had a run of games, has he, for us as such? So we've not seen. Well, let's face it, we haven't really seen anything. I wouldn't dream of commenting, is he any good? Don't know. I literally don't know. I've not watched any under 23 games. It might turn out that he does like an Adebayo and he goes somewhere else and it works really well for him. And I hope it does, fingers crossed. I've got to say one that does surprise me from that release list is Nathan James. Because when he came in, he looked really handy as a centre-half and as a defender. And same as Theo Chapman, look very, very good. But then we've not seen them for 12 months. And then they're released. Again, I come back to, has there been issues, coaching side? Who knows? And then we'll never know, will we? Let's face it. But maybe things now are on turn. He can get himself new backroom staff, new assistant, or whatever he wants to do. But I think main thing for me is he does it himself, and we don't have tag teaming on touchline and I'll stand up and shout for 10 minutes and somebody else stand up and shout for 10 minutes. It's as though he doesn't want to do that. He stood up. Every now and again somebody might come out, but it's as though then, well, no, sit this end down, I'm doing this. And I like that. That's something I like to see.
And I mean, Adam, he's got the experience as a player, but you mustn't forget, he's worked under clearly some decent managers as well. Obviously at Derby, Aston Villa, where he's had really good careers. And hopefully, it'd be unfair to say what he said off record when he spoke to us. But all I can say is he's got a really clear idea of where he thinks things could be improved behind the scenes. And I suppose he's got a wealth of experience from very experienced managers that he can nick the ideas from and make his own stamp at Barnsley. Because I think that's one of the important things, because Martin Devaney leaving, for instance, Adam. I mean, he's been there. He was always seen as the bridge between somebody going out, somebody new coming in. This goal takes over for a bit and then goes back to the sidelines. And clearly, somewhere it's been decided that that's no longer the way forward, whether that's Connor, the board, or whatever. But, he's been at the club forever, hasn't he? So they're not afraid to make the changes maybe that had to be made, Adam.
Yeah, I think that's fair. It's a real shame to see Martin go from a person-to-person perspective. I always got on really well with him. I thought he stepped up in key moments to caretaker the side when he didn't really want to do it. You could tell, and he always tried his best. But he's been around several different coaching setups now, and Connor, I imagine, in consultation with a few other people at the club, maybe wanted to go in a different direction. Martin equally, when we had that conversation, might have thought, go on then, fresh change. None of us have been party to that. And we all, I'm sure, will wish Martin the very best, because he's been a wonderful servant to Barnsley Football Club as a player and as a coach. But clearly, the challenge for Connor now is that he's been able to spend the last couple of years in the twilight of his playing career. It's quite evident now how focused he was on becoming a coach. We saw that with the frustrations around the lack of playing time in the season that's just gone, and the way that his arrival was pitched last summer, which still, I think rankles with quite a few people at the club. That he's been on this quote unquote journey. He's done his badges. He'll have spoken to an inordinate amount of bosses in different fields. He's worked under some incredible bosses as well. Now it's about that theory that he's learned, the ideas in his head, putting them into practice with all those left field things that managers of more vintage and experience will know. And you can already see the difference between the first interview that he did and the kind of last couple that he did, that already is starting to see that, being a head coach on paper with your ideas and what you want to do is different in reality to what happens on a day-to-day basis and the challenges that he has to go along with. So I think the fact that he's had a couple of months at the back end of this season, the fact he's going to get a summer, is big for him at the stage of his career. But he's going to be asked a lot of questions over the next year. And I think only at this time next year will we have a better handle on what it all means.
Yeah.
Like I said, he'll get time because he's Conor Howrahan and it's Barnsley Football Club. But I wish him all the best. I like the way he's come across. I like what he's trying to set out. But it's now a case of what reality looks like as opposed to what those theories and then coaching badges mean. And it'll be tough, won't it? But that's football management. And I know Rob said recently, and I completely echo it, who on earth would want to be a manager or a head coach at a football club, because you just don't stop.
No. Because it's the end of the season, obviously our annual tweet went out asking our fans to surmise the season in 5 words. So here are some of the responses we've had.
Are they clean?
I'm only doing the clean ones. Investment needed to avoid relegation. Inconsistent, leaky, Deadwood, Crossroads over. The most forgettable season ever. Alan Smith, and I got to like this, Alan, and I hope you're doing all right. It started and it finished, which I just think is brilliant. Tangible progress required quickly, Connor. Like that one as well. I'm not going to put what Steve put because it's not clean. Thank God it's over. All too predictable under onus. Phil Hall, the legend that is Phil Hall, who was at the Royal Garden party today, just glad it's over. More goals next season, please. It's just like watching Broomhill. Mlada needs to go now. Unacceptable on and off the pitch. John Russell is a baller. Announce boing, boing, Stephen Humphreys. So there's lots and lots of people. And I suppose, hopefully what people feel that, the season has been forgettable. There's been nothing really outstanding. We went through patches of, at the end of Christmas, New Year, where you have the Wrexham match and everything. Stars align, win 4 on the trot, then don't get another win for about another 8 or 9. Clark goes, Horahan is in charge. It's hard, isn't it? Because if in 20 years you look back, all this is another page that turns over and you start again. I think the positive we have to take, I know people saying, oh, it's the cheap option, in defence, so was Danny Wilson and so were Paul Heckingbottom, and they did all right for the club. So it does feel, Adam, that people have accepted the fact that Connor might just be the right man to do this, because what you don't have to give Connor, or what we don't have to worry about, is passion, desire, and knowing the town and what football means. And that in itself is a huge plus, because any manager on the first day will say, I've played here as an opposition and it's a tough place to come. And you sit there as a fan and think, well, we always lose at home. You know what I mean? It's like, it's just words. Isn't it? We don't have to do that with Connor because he knows.
Yeah, definitely. Look, Connor's a really fascinating character, isn't he? But I think it'll come down to essentially where the club wants to be, what the club wants to do. I quickly just came up with 5 words of realistic plan and execution needed. And that's kind of what it boils down to for me, that the board need to communicate better kind of what they want and where the club's going. And then that needs to be fairly executed, as opposed to what we've seen over the last few years in putting in place some different bosses with different styles, who, in my view, have both done decent jobs that with the tools that they've been given. Football hasn't necessarily been the prettiest at times, but both have had themselves in around the top 6 and both have been binned off. Things may look a bit different now, may feel a bit different. The fact that it's Connor, and I like the references that you've given to some of the people that's achieved in the past. He probably is the cheaper option. The club said there were a couple from abroad that were in for it as well. So what if he's a cheaper option? If he is a cheaper option, it turns out well, then that's more money to be spent on the squad, which clearly ain't bags and bags of money in the background. The ownership of plugging some fairly substantial 7-figure holes, and there isn't loads more from what we can see. So they've got to use the money wisely. But yeah, it just has to have that feel, and we at the minute, all we can do is judge the club over time. We can judge Connor over time, and I think people do have to be a bit more understanding. But the problem is, if the board bin Connor off somewhere through next season when the club's, say, mid-table, then it's just rinse and repeat, isn't it?
Yeah. And my 5 words would have been something like clear vision and backing needed. We need to establish a vision. We need to back that vision. Otherwise, it's just an idea on a PowerPoint or on an Excel spreadsheet. So this is the vision, and this is how we're going to make that happen. And it might not happen, in the first 3 matches or the first few weeks. There needs to be a long-term plan, and we need to start building some foundations for success, rather than hoping of a fantastic season and going up, struggling, and coming back that yo-yo. Steve, if I ask you to put it in 5 words, try and keep it clean. So when I upload this, there's a thing, is there any explicit language? And I always have to put yes. And I'd love it. I love it. But you don't have to if you don't want to.
Well, I know what I did put on the 5 ones, and it involved the bag and some excrement.
Yeah.
I'm not going to put it in 5 words. All I'm going to say is, we need to get behind him. We need to hope that the board do the same. And we're going to have his doubters. We know we are. But for them keyboard warriors that don't know but just slag everything and anything off, let's actually give this guy a chance and give him some time. And if we are mid-table at Christmas, let's try and at least see season out. And if we end up mid-table, but if we're playing decent football, and like I said earlier, it's got to be better than what we've watched for the last 2 seasons.
Yeah.
So let's just get behind him as much as we possibly can. Because at the end of the day, it's us that's paying wages. So, we are entitled.
Yeah.
Although having said that, while I'm on my soapbox, like getting on my soapbox now and again, been down at shop today, just because I've got a couple of minutes to spare in my lunchtime, and ended up spending £54.
Were you working from home, Steve?
I might have been working from home. No, I weren't working from home. I nipped down. I went down for a special thing, but I can't say what it is because he might be watching.
Yeah.
Although he's not rung me for the last few weeks, the miserable bastard. Anyway, that's another story.
There goes my tick.
What? Oh, sorry. Yeah, Jason down at Oakwell Club. I tell you what, I've got a cracking tracksuit. Really, really nice. Should have been 80 odd quid. £34. What's that all about? Lovely, lovely tracky top. I'd
Is it
show
pink?
you, but it's upstairs. No, it's not pink, mate. Bit disappointed with that, actually. But it's grey, bit of shadow on it. 20 quid. We're £60. And it's down to 20 quid. Some really nice stuff down there, but don't buy shirts because they're crap.
Adam, as the football season for Barnsley is over, and obviously Sheffield United are involved in, I suppose, potentially 3 matches to change their season, whatever you want to call it. What does the summer look like for you when the football's died down? We've got a big boxing match coming on, which I'm sure, BBC Sport, BBC Sheffield Sport will get behind. Because for us, it's boring now because that's it, it's all over. What does the summer look like for you?
Well, there was a point in the last few weeks that we thought we might get away with May this year and be able to enjoy that without any playoffs because Chesterfield were nowhere near. Sheffield United were in the top 2. Donny were up there. All the other 3 clubs were mid-table. We thought, we'll not have to bother with the playoffs this year. And then we get 2 teams in the playoffs. So, look, ultimately, it's great. I'm for the playoffs. We've talked a bit about on the show. There'll be loads of people that still don't like it, that would rather see 3 up, 3 down. I do think it extends the season, and it's been a good thing to happen to football. That's just a personal opinion. Does it make it more galling if you finish 3rd and don't go up? Of course it does. But equally, if you finish 4th, 5th, or 6th and go up, then you're grateful for that opportunity. So for us, it's full focus really on the next few weeks, bit of retained list stuff as we've done tonight. And then June is pretty much catch up on holidays that you've not been able to take for the rest of it. And then kind of July, you start working back into it. And also allows us some time to focus on other stuff, cricket, speedway, and like you said, rugby, boxing. And spoke to Callum Simpson last week, was up at the Garrison with him and his opponent, spoke to his manager, Kevin Murray. It's going to be another brilliant night at Oakwell. I am absolutely gutted that I'm driving up to Northumberland for my holiday on the day that it's happening because I've seen a couple of the last 2 Simpson fights and they've been brilliant. I was at Oakwell last year and it was an amazing night. So if it was for a world title, I might have had a word with the missus. But
Good luck with that.
In fear of my life, I'm going to bank on Callum getting through this test and that there are more trips to Oakwell to come. But yeah, that's going to be a big focus of the summer. And there's also a big night at Donny as well. Terry Harper, Maxie Hughes fighting there in a few weeks' time. Loads on the go. It's not the thing about our part of the world is if football didn't exist, there's umpteen other sports and brilliant clubs and everything else that we'd be able to talk about all the time. So we're lucky in that we have a rich of stuff to do that's never going to keep us bored.
Nah, that's true. I was talking to somebody today who says, I don't expect any pre-season friendlies at home because of the Simpson fight. The grass will be taken off later than it usually would have been. So that might mean that, but we don't worry about that. Adam, you first of all, thank you very much. I know you've been, you're basically one of the lads on coming on here and sharing your knowledge, your thoughts, intriguing as always. Genuinely hope that next year when you, if you still want to come on, it can be more positive. It feels like we've got a spring in our step. It feels like the first right decision has been made by the appointment. Now, I suppose, have all eyes on the board, the club, to see how they back their manager. I know, Steve, we've spoken already. You've just been to one of the Greek islands because I got your photos whilst I was at work, drowning in work. Lovely photos of your lass by the pool and, the sea and everything else. And it's not long before you're off again, I heard.
Yes, I've washed my Speedos. They're ready to go again. End of this month. It's only because it's just how it's landed this year. We've been lucky enough to get a couple of really good cheap holidays. And you've got to have something to look forward to in life. And other than watching football and playing a bit of golf, it's nice to get away now and again. So I'm only not going very far, only going to Turkey because obviously me and Ian don't get paid as much as Adam does for doing this. and understandably so, because he's a damn sight more interesting than I am. But yeah, an interesting summer planned.
Very good. Before we go, because I know Alan Smith from Red All Over always listens to our episode. Alan, social media always goes a little bit quiet when Barnsley are not playing, but you know all the Barnsley fans are in your corner as you're fighting this.
Yeah, well said.
We're in your corner. He always leaves a comment on all the shows. He's just one of football's nice guys, and I know there will be scary times. We might not physically be there, but please just look on social media, the number of people tagging you and talking about you, and we're all there. So we might not be on social media, might not be posting much, but it doesn't mean we're not thinking about you. We will be back at the start of next season to talk about Jorge Haynes Reds and the march up the ladder. Or down the next one, but we'll see how it goes. Whatever you do, have a fantastic summer. If you're going to Oakwell for the boxing, I mean, how great would it be to have a successful football team and maybe a world title fight later in the year? Never know. You've been listening and watching the Reds Report for season 10. We are signing off, and we'll speak again in August. Thank you.